Hey, batters up for another JavaScript interview question. And with this one, it's time to take a swing at closures, higher order functions, and callbacks. All right, so here is the function. We gotta write a function sum such that this line over here would log result 15. Okay, so there's definitely a lot of weirdness going on. There's 6 sets of parentheses over here. First 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all in their own sets of parentheses. And then we have a final one where the parameter is a function itself. Now, to say the least, this could probably be achieved with a simpler syntax, but nonetheless, let's figure out the JavaScript. There's some good lessons to learn here. So first up, instead of tackling the overall line, let's tackle 2 isolated scenarios. The trick to this question is not to do the whole thing at once, but to deconstruct it into smaller pieces so that way the overall solution can be built. So to start, let's have an isolated scenario 1 where sum is called. First, 1 is passed in a set of parentheses, and then 2 is passed in a second set of parentheses after that. The second scenario that we'll tackle is this sum call, where the function is an argument to the sum function itself. So that whole result pointing to the console.log is an argument to that sum function. Now we're going to tackle this isolated scenario number 1 first. So go ahead and comment out that second scenario as well as the original question. Now to start, the job is to create a function sum. So let's go ahead and create that function sum with the argument a. But then sum of 1 is called, and it's almost like sum of 1 is its own function, which can have 2 passed into it, as if function sum of 1 has been declared, and that parameter would be b. However, this syntax isn't valid. We've already opened up this set of parentheses, and that is used to have arguments. You can't have parentheses as part of the function argument itself. So the trick here isn't to declare a function where the parentheses are already passed. Instead, it's to return a function itself from the sum of a function. So let's go ahead and call sum of a and pass in 1 and see what that result looks like. And indeed, it's a function. Now it's possible that that function itself could have parameters too. So give it a b parameter, and as a result of that inner function, well, return a plus b, which means that this sum of 1 function now has a parameter. So we can pass 2 to sum of 1 and 2. And the result in the REPL, when running this whole thing, should be 3. So great, we've set up a scenario where sum of 1 and 2 can equal 3, which, given that the question goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sum of all of those is 15, we're on the right track. We have an inner function which does at least the first 2 sets of parentheses right now to get to 3. This isolated scenario is bringing up 2 very important concepts in JavaScript. The first concept is the idea of a closure. A closure in JavaScript is an inner function within another function that encloses its environment. And that environment consists of 3 scopes. That scope is first the global scope. So here is the global scope accessible at the root of the overall program. Then it has the outer scope of the function that it lives within, and then it has its own inner scope with its own variables. Now, if we separate out the arguments, or rather the calls to sum, first we have a function that we can call sum with 1, which is the result of only using parentheses once on the sum function. And this is the returned closure from the sum function. So sum with 1 is the returned closure. And again, it's a closure because it encloses the variables in its environment. Now, instead of calling sum 1 of 2, you can also call sum with 1 and pass in 2, and the result is the same. Now, I mentioned before that there's 2 important concepts that this whole thing is bringing up. But before I get to that second important concept, let's extend the structure that we have right now to make it all the way to 15. So we already have sum of 1 and 2 going up to 3. The next one is to get 3 involved with that to return 6 overall. So we already have this overall structure. Now we need to extend the overall pattern. Rather than returning a plus b as a result of the inner function, well, let's return another closure. How about a function a, b, c? And this will return a plus b plus c. So now, when we get to sum of 1 and then 2, we can also pass in 3. And the result should be 6. It evaluates to 6. Nice. And we can keep going until we have all 5 of the arguments. So we can return function of d, and within that we'll return function of e. And the overall result is that this last inner closure should have a plus b plus c plus d plus e, which means when you call sum of 1, of 2, of 3, and then of 4 and of 5, you should find the overall result is indeed 15. Nice. All right, so with that, we've completed most of the original question. We have a structure which can get at least this half part to return 15. So now let's tackle the second scenario. As we're tackling the second scenario, let me talk about that second concept that I was saying earlier. The second big concept that this first scenario is bringing up is the idea of a higher order function. So a higher order function in JavaScript does one of two things. Let me write those down. So higher order function. 1, it returns a function itself. So this is one of the ways that a higher order function can be one. And we certainly have that with this isolated scenario. It's returning a function itself. Or 2, the higher order function is 1 when it takes another function as an argument. So here we have that little or. So there are 2 cases, and that second case for a higher order function is that it takes another function as an argument. So this sum function we have right now is a higher order function. It's returning a function. But as seen below, sum used in this way is also a higher order function because it's taking another function, an arrow function, as an argument. Instead of calling this sum, let's rename it so we don't have a conflict with above. Let's call this execute argument. Let's comment it out for now, but we're going to set up the function execute argument. So a higher order function takes another function as an argument. So let's call that the function argument. Now that function argument can be called itself. We can invoke it using the regular pair of parentheses. Now there's actually a name for this function argument in JavaScript, and that is a callback. So let's say that this is the callback argument, and we're actually calling the function back within the body of the function where the callback is being passed. So let's explore execute argument. Call it below, and let's pass it a function. Instead of having a parameter for now, let's have a console.log that says from execute argument. And once you have that, go ahead and run the overall REPL. And you'll find that indeed the callback is called and you get the log of from execute argument. Now, since this callback is a function, it can still take parameters. So for example, say we had a constant called inner result. We set that to 99. Now that callback function can have an argument of inner result. So that callback function is this overall argument to execute argument. Since we're passing an argument to that callback function, well, now there can be a parameter to that callback function itself of result. And then the second parameter to that console.log can be that result itself. I'm going to go ahead and shorten this down a little bit so it's not so squished. But in effect, if you execute this whole thing, what you'll find is that it's now argument 99. Again, the callback function is passing in this inner result argument, but that callback function is set up with a parameter. And with that parameter, it logs result. So now we figured out the second piece in the overall puzzle to figuring out that original question. With this structure, we can build up the overall solution. After all, look at what we have below. It's the same exact concept as this proof of concept code. There is a callback function, which is being passed an argument, and that callback function itself has a parameter, so therefore it's used in the body of the function itself. So when you run this, now it's result 99. All right, we're very close. Let's apply the concepts learned here within scenario 2 into that original sum function. In the sum function above, instead of returning a plus b plus c plus d plus e, let's set that to a variable called total. So go ahead and take out the entire chunk of a plus b all the way to e, and then set it to a constant total. Now we're going to have to return a function as a result of this still, because as seen, there is a sixth set of parentheses calling that function, but that function itself has an argument, like execute argument below, of a callback. And that callback function is going to pass in that total. That way, when the callback function is called, what is applied as the parameter is now that total. So total will be set to result, and console.log result and result should occur. All right, so go ahead and comment out all the other code except for function sum, because this should be the overall solution. I'm going to go ahead and comment out this code and then bring back in the overall sum function from the original question. All right, moment of truth, drum roll. Going to go ahead and run, and there it is. Result 15 is logged. Nice. Ultimately, this may be one of the most weird structures that you're ever going to see in JavaScript, 6 set of parentheses in a row. It's definitely a tricky interview question, but it does drive at important concepts in JavaScript, including higher order functions, closures, and callbacks. So it'd be a good opportunity to show your experience with functions if you ever had something like this on an interview. Hopefully it's not this weird and tricky, but in any case, you're going to be prepared. Okay, I hope you're looking forward to more interview question videos as well as other content. I'll see you in the next one.